Hi, welcome to the next episode of the Project Management Distilled program. In this module, we'll be talking about collecting the detailed requirements and then defining the scope. Uh, at this stage, we are still in planning. We have completed the project initiation. A project manager is appointed, and as an output of initiation, we got the project charter and a stakeholder register. And the project manager is in the process. You developed a project management plan, and the next step process, the second process under planning, is collect requirements. Here we are talking about collecting the detailed requirements of the project, and the tools and techniques used for collecting requirements are interviews with the relevant stakeholders, process groups, facilitated workshops, and group creativity techniques like the Six Thinking Hats by Edward de Bono and things like that. Group decision making techniques like uh, group discussions, uh, voting, uh, yeah, those kind of thing. And questionnaires and surveys are also used to collect requirements. And observations and creation of prototypes to solicit additional feedback. So all these things can be used to collect additional requirements. And the output of collect requirements, is the requirements documentation. Here we are talking about the detailed requirement documentation, because so far we were operating through a statement of work which was the high level requirements. Now we are elaborating that into detailed requirements. Then we need to have a requirements management plan, like who will do all these interviews and collating of information, who will do the analysis, who will document it, and who will be the approving authority. And during project execution, if the scope changes, again what is the approval process. So all these things need to be documented in the form of a requirements management plan. Otherwise it can be total mayhem when we really get into the execution mode. Then it will help if you have a requirements traceability metrics, which will ensure that you are delivering as per the requirements. That means from the start of the project till the end of the project, if you can maintain a traceability metrics starting from the statement of work, which is the high level requirements, to the detailed requirements, which is the to the detailed requirements, to the scope, and to the design documents, and to the product, and to the test result. So if there is a forward traceability as well as backward traceability, then we can ensure that we are just delivering what the customer wants, nothing more, nothing less. Then once the requirements are defined, then we get into defining the scope. The baseline requirements we call as the scope. And again, the inputs for defined scope is the project charter, which is an output of project initiation, the requirements documentation, which is an output of collect requirements, and the organizational process assets like the templates which we may use for documenting the requirements, the domain knowledge, the requirements review checklist. All these things are examples of organizational process assets which we will use while defining the scope. And the tools and techniques for defining the scope are expert judgment, product analysis, alternatives identification, and facilitated workshops. And the output side is the project scope statement and the document updates. So while defining the scope, we may go back and update any of the documents like the project charter, because if the detailed scope has major impact on the timelines or the scope or the cost because of scope changes, then it is imperative that okay, we have to go back and update the project charter even. So any document can get updated during any cycle of the project. Only thing is that it has to follow a change management procedure. It is not a free for all situation. Once the project scope is defined, that becomes the basis for all future decisions, and that is the baseline for monitoring the project scope. And in a good scope statement, you have to define what will be included as part of the scope and what will not be included as part of the scope. The project scope definition, tools and techniques, we have product analysis, alternatives identification, expert judgment, and stakeholder analysis. Under product analysis, we are talking about function analysis, analyzing all the things that a product does, including primary and related functions, to identify unnecessary functions that might drive up cost in a product. Now, when a car manufacturer is launching a new economy version of a successful sedan, then okay, yeah, primarily they'll be for cost reduction. They'll be talking about the prioritization of the features and then throwing out those features which doesn't have that much impact on the customer requirement. Primarily, we can classify the requirements into the must-have requirements, the should-have requirements, and the nice-to-have requirements, and then document them. Then comes the value engineering and the value analysis. It's like identifying and developing cost versus benefit ratio for each function of the product. So when I was constructing my house, okay, I asked for a swimming pool, and that person, the architect, was reluctant to give the swimming pool. He asked me further questions like, if you do you have a swimming pool in the house where you're staying? I said yes. How many years you have been staying there? 5 years. And how many times you use the pool? 5 times. Then he said, okay, I will not give you a swimming pool because that is very expensive for you. You need not go for a swimming pool. At a fraction of the cost of a swimming pool, you can always get a premium club membership. Then I agreed with him. There's an typical example of identifying and developing cost versus benefit ratio for each function of the product. And there is an example for alternatives analysis as well. Then quality function deployment. In the previous slide, we discussed about the requirements traceability metrics. Here we are talking about exactly the same thing, a mapping of requirements to the features, to the product, to the results, test results kind of thing. With another terminology for that is quality function deployment, where quality is conformance to the requirements and fitness for use. And the systems engineering, very often I've seen where the product gets released to the customer's place, and in the deployment scenario it fails. It could be because of a lack of systems engineering, because always the focus of the team is onto the internals of the project, because once in a while we need to focus on the deployment scenarios as well. Otherwise we may land up in issues where we lack forward compatibility, backward compatibility, interoperability. So all those issues can come in. Alternatives identification, we already discussed. Any technique used to generate different ways to achieve the project goals. It's like swimming pool versus club membership, construction of all the rooms versus prefabrication of some of the common features. Like in a multi-storied building, if you can prefabricate the bathrooms which are identical in nature, then we can bring in a lot of parallelism into the schedule, so that we can speed up the project. Lateral thinking is a general term for creative approach to team problem solving. All the concepts and issues related to a problem are considered. The focus is on new thought pattern and fresh approach. Brainstorming is like a group of people coming to the room, and the only intent is to come out with as many ideas as possible, and it is allowed to build on others' ideas as well, and it is facilitated by a facilitator. Then Delphi technique. It is not very complicated, because when I went for an interview maybe 20 years back, somebody asked me what is Delphi technique. I said I don't know. Then he was very smart, so he asked me questions like, maybe if you're estimating a project where you don't have the domain knowledge, then what you do? I said I'll call a set of experts and then ask them to and give them the explain the scope of work to them, and ask them to estimate it independently, and then we bring them to a room and then allow group discussions will happen, and we allow them to discuss, debate, and then converge on certain numbers. We don't go by averages, we don't go by majority. They have to discuss and debate and converge, and that is known as Delphi. Delphi is always done by experts. From the exam point of view, that is very, very important. Delphi is always done by experts, and yeah, and brainstorming. Sometimes we invite people without expertise as well to get some fresh perspectives. with that, we are completing the requirements, the collect requirements and define scope. Uh, I hope it was beneficial to you. Thank you very much.